Hi, Dave Sussman, Ricochet.com, Whiskey Politics at Freedom Fest, and we are here with Michelle Marconi, who has just written a book with Dr. Art Laffer, a name many of you may recognize, called Let's Chat About Economics, which is geared towards children. Found it fascinating, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
So, first question for you is, how did you and Dr. Art Laffer, who is a legend, you know, as far as working with Ronald Reagan and the Laffer Curve, and want to hear the whole story about the cocktail napkin and the whole thing. How did you join forces with Dr. Laffer on this book?
Well, you know, it was a really personal experience. I saw Dr. Laffer speak in Detroit at the Detroit Economic Club luncheon, and he stood in a room with hundreds of auto executives and said that he wouldn't have bailed them out. And he said it with a laugh, but he, you know, said it matter-of-factly and speaking to pure economics. Mm-hmm. And he went on, you know, in his presentation to give really terrific examples of economics in action using his famous Farmer A and Farmer B examples. And during this luncheon, I leaned over to my husband and said, I really wish the kids were here. They were 10 and 12 at the time, and I just felt they would have an advantage in life, you know, if only Arthur Laffer could come home with us. And it was that experience and that love we all have for our children to really want them to, you know, pursue their lives with all the information. We had a great dinner time conversation with our children. We would give them the definition of the relationship between supply and demand. They would give us examples from their own life. We went on to incentives, opportunity costs, diminishing returns. And I looked for a book after that and didn't find one, so I knew what I had to do. I had to go back to the muse himself, and I wrote Dr. Laffer and proposed that we write a book for families together.
And he responded.
He responded right away, game on. He was a grandfather and a great-grandfather to one at the time. Now he has 12 grandchildren and 3 great-grands.
Wow. You know, for those that are not familiar historically with Dr. Laffer, before we get into the book here, explain how he impacted the Reagan administration with his economic policy, if you can.
Sure. Well, you know, Dr. Laffer's a purist, and he can speak very matter-of-factly because he knows what he knows is truth, and he has confidence in saying that. And so most people, when they hear Dr. Arthur Laffer, they immediately think of the Laffer Curve, which, and when I work with children, this is the way I explain it. It's finding the sweet spot. You know, it's what can we do with this amount of work to achieve the maximum benefit before we no longer receive that benefit anymore. And in our house, we talk about diminishing returns. You know, Dr. Laffer would tell you he didn't invent really the Laffer Curve, but he did illustrate it as it relates to taxes. And we all know what happened in the Reagan administration. You know, it did impact and lead to a tax cut in which, you know, we really enjoyed the benefits from that.
And the idea behind that is the more you reduce taxes, the more you stimulate the economy.
Yes, and the idea is, you know, don't forget, finding the sweet spot. Because obviously if you collect 0 taxes, you're going to achieve 0 benefit from that.
Right.
So hence the curve. It's all about finding the sweet spot.
Yeah. And so here we are, and it's some 30 plus years later, and you know, we were talking briefly before the interview. You know, economics is not being taught today, is it? Especially to our young children, and this is one of the reasons that you wanted to create this book.
Well, I wanted to create the book beginning with a very personal experience, but I did look into it and was very curious about our children's education because I don't know too many families that are reading curriculum. If you're a teacher, you're closely tied to curriculum. We're all familiar that currently we have Common Core. I can tell you there is 0 economics taught in Common Core. Nothing is required for economics there. However, you have to look at it state by state, and then the District of Columbia has their own curriculum. So I have broken that down. The National Council for Economic Education releases a survey every 2 years. Their most recent one was April 2016. So here's what it tells us. In the past 20 years, we have gone from 39 states having economics in curriculum to now 50 states plus DC. But don't get too excited, because that's the number of states, all states in DC, that include economics in the curriculum. It's not required to be taught. It's included, but not required to be taught. When you go down the level and you see what is actually required and what's being measured with a standardized test, you get 16 states. that require it to be in the curriculum, required it to be taught, required it to be taken by students, and then a standardized test. You come all the way down to 16 states, and I might mention that's in high school. That's at the high school level. What Dr. Laffer and I advocate for is early and often. You need to be talking to elementary students about economics. There are a few states that do a great job. Texas does a great job. Virginia does a great job. The state of Michigan does a great job. They have K through 12 economics. So that's terrific. However, we all have to raise our hands as parents and grandparents. We have to take responsibility for practicing. You have to get your 10,000 hours in.
Right.
To become proficient in something, it takes practice. What we do in Let's Chat About Economics is we take real terms. We have 26 terms, and we present them through everyday scenarios so that the next time you would go grocery shopping with your children, you know that you're going to see examples of supply and demand reflected in the price. You may see an opportunity cost example because you're saying, should we pick up this dessert or that dessert? If you choose the brownie, then the apple pie becomes the opportunity cost. These are all conversations you can have with your children once they know the real terms.
Do you feel that the folks that are in our educational system today, especially in public schools, they have the wherewithal to even understand what you're talking about, especially when it comes to capitalism and supply and demand and free markets?
Well, that's a tough one to answer, right? Because that can vary person by person,
right,
state by state, even district by district, because many districts augment their state curriculum. So it really comes down to the individual, which is hard to measure. I can tell you that I am really, really pleased to find a few states doing a good job. I hope they become the model for other states to update their curriculum with economics. But I can tell you, again, as a parent, let's not rely on the education system to raise our children. If you think about it, we parent children for a short amount of time. We actually parent adults forever, for the rest of our lives. They are still our children and they're adults. So imagine...
I could use some more parenting.
Yes, couldn't we all? I'm calling my mom after this. But, think about the conversations you're going to have with your children at 15, at 21, at 28, at 35, at 45.
Right.
Those will be economic conversations. All we're saying is that the choices your kids make today, which shirt to wear, the red or the blue shirt, after school, how are you spending your time? On Xbox or working on your left-handed layup in the driveway because basketball tryouts are coming? Those are actually economic choices. Give your kids the tools and watch them take off. It actually means you'll have to parent a little less because they'll become really good at decision making.
It's interesting, and I want to get back to book here in just a minute, but you're talking about something that is not being discussed in the mainstream media, especially in schools, and kids are being brought up, and they might hear about politics, especially if their parents are involved with it, but they certainly don't hear about this. And talk about tax policy, forget about it. There's no understanding it. You work very closely with Dr. Laffer. What are the feelings from you both right now regarding what is happening right now with tax policy? We're talking about D.C. basically sitting around twiddling their thumbs, figuring out they may or may not pass, and they don't know if they have the votes to pass. I mean, what are we looking at right now? The last major tax reform was in 1986 when Dr. Laffer was around. All right, 31 years ago. All right. What are you both thinking about what needs to be done right now?
Sure. I would never pretend to speak for Dr. Laffer, but I can tell you that he is encouraging the administration to get on with this. It's not being addressed now. Obviously, healthcare is the main concern right now. I did hear right before our interview Speaker Ryan say that they will get to it in the fall. So that's good news. Let's hope that it really does become addressed.
With his border adjustment tax.
Well, we'll have to see about that, what actually gets done. I can tell you in the book that Chapter 3 takes care of taxes. For anyone listening, I'm sure your children and your grandchildren don't understand taxes, and they don't know how their teachers are paid for. They don't know how police and fire, even their public parks are paid for. This is a tremendous opportunity to talk about taxes. And as I like to say, there's no way I could have written a book with Dr. Arthur Laffer and not have addressed taxes.
Right.
So we do this beautifully in Chapter 3, which is called the Summertime chapter. Kids have more time to spend, a lot of choices. And in this chapter, you have two children, same family. Mom and dad mandate a 50% savings of their allowance. So you have two children react completely two separate ways. You have one child who happens to be a girl who says, I'll work twice as much to earn twice as much, and then putting away 50% really won't impact me that much. I'll still have the same amount to spend.
Right.
The boy says, no, I'm not going to do my chores. 50% is too much to take away from me. I'll just do free stuff all summer. Well, we all know nothing's free. In fact, Dr. Laffer and I believe free should be a 4-letter word. But mom and dad come into this conversation and explain taxes and how they don't bring home everything they make, and how certain things are paid for that they agree with and they don't agree with. Mm-hmm. This is a good conversation starter. We give families conversation starters to talk about real economic terms, and once children see it in their lives immediately, how they're spending their time after school, it's much easier for them to grow up with economics, thinking economically, and then putting into practice, as they get older.
Do you think there's an appetite right now for a discussion to reintroduce this back into schools? I know that it's suggested in the curriculum, mm-hmm. right, but not mandated. Listen, I was in high school in the early 1980s. We did have a free enterprise class. Mm-hmm. I look at the old Risky Business movie with Tom Cruise, right? That whole movie revolved around his project with the free enterprise class that he had in high school. We don't see that now. My oldest son is in high school. I don't know of any. I mean, there may be an economics club, right? That would be something that he could join if he wanted to. But I don't think this is taught. Is there an appetite? I mean, you talk about that book needing to be read by the Congress, right? Is there an appetite to make that now more required than anything?
Well, all politics, and I would say all curriculum, is local. Mm-hmm. It's up to parents to get involved. I can tell you, we're also in California. Our high school in our district requires, our son is also in high school, that he take a government and an economics course. That's required for his graduation. Okay. He must take that. I actually don't think that's ideal, and I'll tell you why. There was a PwC report recently of educators, mm-hmm. and 62% said that elementary school is the ideal time to introduce economics to children. So that's the ideal place. If it's not happening at your elementary school level, and if it's not happening in your high school level, which again, it is state by state and even district by district, you've got to take care of business at home. And I think whether it's offered in school or not, you have to take care of business at home. You've got to make this a priority. For our family, we've been doing this for many years, and in our family, our kids have to explain to us when they make a choice, or if they're asking to do something, whether it has to do with time or money, they have to give it back to us. Could there be diminishing returns? What is the opportunity cost? If you're willing to pay that price for concert tickets, is elasticity at hand? So these are conversations we have. We make it a priority for our children. And, I just would add this with regard to policy.
Yeah.
Any policy that's passed this fall, next year, within, the remainder of this administration, any policy that's passed is going to be short-lived unless we are educating our children with economics and getting that practice, getting those 10,000 hours in at home, because we're going to keep debating these issues every 2 to 4, 6, 8 years. And the child that's reading Let's Chat About Economics, that's 10 or 11 now, will be voting in the 2024 elections.
And they may be serving in 20 years from now as well.
They may be.
And we have an entire generation that grew up in the 80s and now the 90s that are serving. Many of them didn't have this education.
That's right.
And that's quite scary.
It's scary,
yes.
I have a presentation, How to Raise an Economist.
Right.
And, I make a very important point that, we can take care of our children at home and we can teach them economics, but we need to be cognizant of the world that we are letting them loose in. And I play Jonathan Gruber's clip, and not even to be disrespectful, but to call him a truth teller.
Right.
Because he said two things that are very important. A lack of transparency is a political advantage. So that is an actual strategy. Lack of transparency, not letting us know what's really going on. So that's cause for independent thinking. And also reliance on the stupidity of the American voter. As parents, what are we doing to encourage our children to be independent thinkers and to know the economics? It doesn't, it's not a mystery that healthy people have to pay in to fund people who are ill who need the health care coverage. this is something that our fifth grader knew at the time.
Right.
So, I played that clip with Mr. Gruber statement because he's a truth teller. We all knew it. Now we really know it. What are we going to do about it?
What's incredible about that clip is it didn't get any mainstream play. You saw maybe a little bit on Fox News and some of the more conservative-leaning sites, but the fact that was what he said, he actually said those words,
right?
That they relied on the stupidity of the American voter to allow Obamacare to pass, and yet people still just kind of said, "Yeah, no, we still support this thing." That was I thought a truth-telling moment right there.
It is, and you have to look at it fairly. So fairly. Overall, we as Americans want to take care of other Americans. We want people to have health care, whether it's private or through the government. We want people to be taken care of. I firmly believe we all care about each other. But let's raise children and potentially, our policymakers now, let's educate them with economics so it can be done in a fiscally sound way that makes sense instead of something collapsing on itself, which is what we see now.
Now, this is the first book in a series, right?
It is. Dr. Laffer and I have continued to work together. So our second book that will be published is Let's Chat About Democracy. And this is a great story of a treehouse and children trying to decide should they use monarchy, anarchy, dictatorship, communism, or they arrive at democracy as the best way. It's a very patriotic book. It starts Memorial Day weekend. It ends by Independence Day.
A much safer Lord of the Flies.
Yes, it's a lot safer and it's a lot more patriotic.
Great.
And then a third book I'm writing right now is Let's Chat About Immigration, where we tell a collection of immigration stories. And as someone pointed out to me, it's important to say why immigrants would like to come to our country, but also what the United States gets from our immigrants, and it's vast.
Fantastic. Now, people can find the books where? Amazon?
Anywhere you would love.
Anywhere
Amazon,
and everywhere.
Anywhere and everywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and everywhere in between. And if your small independent bookstore doesn't have it, they can certainly order it.
So let's show the book here. It's Let's Chat About Economics. You can find it at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, or basically anywhere books are sold. Michelle Marconi, thank you so much. Thank Dr. Laffer for us, and good luck with the book. And follow us, folks, at whiskeypolitics.net. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, where your 5-star rating will be very helpful to help others find us. Special thanks to Michelle Marconi. We'll see you soon. Thanks.